The alarm in my collar buzzes twice, and that means someone important is coming, and I have exactly 4 seconds to look small again. I drop the cleaning cloth. I bow my head. I let my shoulders fall the way they taught me on the very first day, back when I was 6 years old, and didn't understand why the guards laughed every time I flinched. Now I understand it perfectly. A flinch buys silence. A bowed head buys another day of being ignored. And being ignored is the only freedom left to someone like me. My name is Elena Reyes, though nobody in this tower has called me that in 11 years. To them I am Unit 7, Delta 19, a number stitched into a collar that reads my pulse, my temperature, and the exact moment I feel fear, because fear is useful data to an empire that conquered 100 worlds by knowing exactly how afraid its prisoners were. The footsteps belong to Administrator Rennick Halcorn, and he walks like a man who has never once doubted that the galaxy owes him something. He stops in the doorway of the study, and behind him stands a visitor I have never seen before, tall, pale gray skin, a uniform stitched with the insignia of the Outer Fleet. A guest. Guests mean performances. Performances mean danger, because guests like to test the property before they buy it. I keep my eyes on the floor and my hands folded, and I listen, because listening is the one skill they never managed to take from me. Halcorn says my price has gone up. He says the human breed has proven surprisingly obedient, easy to keep, easy to train, nothing at all like the old war stories the veterans used to tell about humanity fighting to the last breath on every world they lost. He laughs when he says it. The guest does not laugh. The guest studies me the way a buyer studies livestock, and for one long moment his eyes rest on my hands. My knuckles are wrong for a servant, too much muscle beneath the skin. I have spent 11 years keeping my hands loose, my fingers soft, my grip weak in front of anyone who might notice, and still, once in a while, someone notices anyway. The guest asks Halcorn a question in a dialect I am not supposed to understand, and Halcorn answers with a shrug, unaware that I understand every word. The guest is asking whether the human has ever been tested for combat reflex. Halcorn says there is no need. Humans, he says, are pets now, nothing more. I have heard variations of this sentence for 11 years, and every single time I have said nothing, and felt nothing show on my face, and gone back to scrubbing the floor as if the words meant nothing to me. Tonight is different. Tonight, for the first time since I was 6 years old, I let myself feel the shape of that sentence, and I decide it will be the last time anyone says it in front of me. The guest leaves an hour later, and Halcorn retires to his private study to celebrate whatever deal he has made, because I hear him tell his assistant, a nervous young Kalian named Fessa, that the human is to be crated and shipped to the war world of Threx within 3 days, a gift for a fleet commander who collects curiosities. Crated, like cargo, like something without a name. I return to the servants' alcove that night and I sit very still in the dark, and for the first time in 11 years, I stop pretending to be small. Here is something the Kalian Dominion never learned. Not in 100 years of conquest, not in 100 worlds catalogued and studied and filed away in their endless intelligence archives. They know everything that humanity ever admitted to knowing about itself. Every treaty, every declared weapon, every diplomatic file handed over during the years before the invasion, when humanity still believed diplomacy might save it. What they never found was the file that was never written down. A quiet program, buried decades before the invasion, deep inside a research division that answered to no elected government and reported to no public record. A program built on the belief that if humanity was ever cornered, it would need more than treaties to survive. They called the subjects seed children. My mother was one of the volunteers. I never learned her name. I only learned, piece by piece, smuggled memory by smuggled memory, what she had given me before the invasion swept her away along with everyone else who might have told me the truth. Faster reflexes than they ever expected from a child my size. A body that heals in days instead of weeks. A mind that remembers a hallway layout after walking it only once. None of it looks like anything on the surface. That is the entire design. I was built to look ordinary until the moment ordinary stopped being useful. For 11 years I have used that gift for nothing but survival. I memorized Halcorn's security codes over his shoulder while pretending to polish his desk. I learned the language of the guards by listening through walls while scrubbing floors nobody thought a human could understand. I mapped every drone patrol in this tower, every biometric lock, every guard rotation, one small unnoticed detail at a time, the way slow water eventually wears down solid stone. I never used any of it, because using it meant risking everything, and for 11 years, staying alive quietly seemed like enough. Tonight it stops being enough. I break the alcove door with my bare hands, and it gives way easier than I expected, because I have never once let myself find out how strong I truly am. The corridor beyond is empty, except for a single patrol drone, hovering at the far end, its scanner sweeping in a slow, lazy arc that I have watched 1,000 times from behind a mop bucket. I move before it completes its turn. My feet make almost no sound on the polished floor, and by the time the drone's scanner reaches the space where I stood, I am already 3 steps past it, moving toward the security hub at the end of the east corridor. A guard named Dessen steps out of a side room, rifle slung over one shoulder, and for a moment his eyes widen because he recognizes me, the quiet servant who never once looked him in the eye. He raises a hand to activate his comm unit, and I close the distance before his fingers finish the motion. A single precise strike to the nerve cluster at the base of his neck, exactly where the old smuggled manuals said it would work, and he slides down the wall without a sound, breathing steady, unconscious, unharmed beyond a headache he will wake up with in the morning. I take his access card and keep moving. The security hub is guarded by 2 more soldiers, and I do not have the luxury of surprising both of them the same way. The first alarm goes off the moment I round the corner, a shrill electronic pulse that floods the corridor with red light, and I know from this point forward there is no version of tonight that ends quietly. I duck under the first soldier's aim and drive my shoulder into his ribs, enough to knock the air from his lungs and send him stumbling into a supply cabinet. The second one fires a stun pulse that grazes my arm, and the pain is sharp and immediate, but my body processes it faster than it should, faster than any Kalian soldier's body would, and I am moving again before the shock fully registers. I press his own weapon arm against the wall until the pulse discharges into the ceiling instead of into me, and then I am past him too, sliding into the security hub and slamming the door control behind me. Inside, the terminal glows with 100 camera feeds, and I find the one I need in seconds, the private study where Halcorn is still celebrating his profitable evening with a glass of something purple and expensive. I could vanish now. I have the access codes. I have a stolen uniform hanging in a locker 2 corridors away, prepared months ago for a day I told myself might never come. I could slip out through the loading bay and disappear into the lower districts before the tower even finishes locking down. But I think about the crate waiting for me in 3 days, and I think about 11 other names I found buried in old fragments of that same abandoned program, scattered across a dozen worlds, waiting the same way I waited, small and quiet and patient, for someone to prove it was finally time to stop pretending. I walk to Halcorn's study instead of the loading bay. He looks up when the door opens, his glass halfway to his lips, and his expression moves through several stages in the space of 2 seconds. Irritation, because a servant should never enter unannounced. Confusion, because the alarm should have stopped me long before I reached this room. And then something else entirely, something I have never once seen on his face in 11 years, because he has never had a single reason to feel it around me. He asks what this is. He asks it the way a man asks a question he already suspects he will not like the answer to. I tell him my name is Elena Reyes, and that it has been 11 years since anyone in this tower has heard it spoken aloud, and that I would like him to remember it in whatever version of tonight comes next. He reaches for the alarm switch built into his desk, and I am faster, closing the distance and pinning his wrist before his fingers reach it. I do not hurt him beyond what is necessary. I have spent 11 years learning exactly how much force accomplishes exactly how much result, and tonight I intend to prove a point, not become the thing his empire always assumed I secretly was. I tell him he is going to walk me to the private shuttle bay on the east wing, calmly, without triggering another alarm, and that if he does exactly that, nothing further will happen to him tonight. He does not believe at first that a servant is giving him instructions inside his own tower. I watch the moment his belief changes, somewhere around the time I explain, quietly, precisely, which of his own security protocols I disabled 6 minutes ago, and which ones I could just as easily reactivate the instant he stops cooperating. He walks. The corridors we pass through are in chaos, guards rushing in every direction, alarms cycling through different tones as different sections of the tower try to locate the source of the breach, and through all of it, I keep close enough to Halcorn that anyone watching would assume he is simply escorting his own property somewhere, which, in a strange way, is exactly what is happening. We reach the shuttle bay with less resistance than I expected, mostly because nobody in this tower has ever been trained to imagine a scenario where their administrator willingly walks a servant toward an escape route. Halcorn's own authority becomes the very thing that clears my path. At the shuttle door, he finally speaks again, his voice quieter now, stripped of its earlier confidence. He asks what I even am, not who, what. I tell him the truth, because it no longer matters whether he believes it or repeats it to anyone. I tell him about a program that existed before either of us were born, buried so deep that even his empire's endless intelligence archives never found a single page of it. I tell him that his empire spent 100 years studying humanities treaties and diplomatic files and public military doctrine, and never once considered that the file worth fearing was the one nobody ever wrote down. I tell him that humans were never as simple to keep as his report suggested, and that somewhere on a dozen other worlds, there are others like me, waiting the same patient way I waited, and that tonight is only the first name checked off a very long list. Then I step into the shuttle, seal the door, and lift off before the tower's automated defense grid finishes recalibrating around the chaos I left behind. The flight out of the system is not clean. 2 patrol craft rise to intercept, their weapons systems locking onto my stolen shuttle within minutes, and for a while it seems entirely possible that tonight ends here, in the dark between 2 moons, in a ship never designed for combat, piloted by someone who has never actually piloted anything beyond a supply cart. But 11 years of watching, memorizing, and waiting were never wasted years. I remember every flight pattern I ever glimpsed on a monitor while mopping a hallway floor. I remember the exact blind spot in the patrol formation that guards complained about during their shift changes, never imagining the servant folding their laundry was listening. I guide the shuttle through that blind spot with seconds to spare, and by the time the patrol craft correct their course, I am already beyond the range where their systems can reliably track me. 3 systems later, the shuttle's fuel reserves are nearly empty, and so am I, in every sense that matters. My arm throbs where the stun pulse grazed it hours ago, already healing faster than it should, and my hands finally begin to shake now that there is nothing left to keep them steady for. I land on a quiet trade outpost far outside Dominion patrol routes, a place where nobody looks too closely at strangers because everybody there is running from something. I sit in the shuttle for a long while before I finally step outside, and for the first time since I was 6 years old, nobody's eyes are on me, waiting to see whether I will flinch. I do not flinch. I think, instead, about the 11 other names buried in the fragments of records I found over the years, scattered across a dozen worlds, each of them a child born the same quiet way I was born, each of them waiting the same patient way I waited. I think about how long it might take to reach even one of them, and how much longer to reach them all, and I understand, standing there in the thin light of an unfamiliar sun, that tonight was never the ending of anything. It was only ever the beginning. The Kalian Dominion built an empire on knowing exactly how afraid its prisoners were, and for 11 years, I let them believe they had measured me correctly. Somewhere behind me, in a tower still cycling through alarms it cannot fully explain, an administrator is discovering that the file he thought he understood was never the whole story. Somewhere ahead of me, 11 names are waiting for someone to finally say the word that means it is time to stop pretending. My name is Elena Reyes. I was catalogued as property for 11 years, and tonight I stopped being anyone's property at all. Let every record they keep from this night forward reflect exactly that, because I intend to make certain it becomes very difficult for them to forget.